to be back here together doing Bible study, like we said, for the first time in, probably at least a year. So we're just grateful to have made it this year and to be back in the presence of one another. And most of all, we're just grateful for who you are, the way that you've carried us through this year, even through all of the hardships and the trials. But you are our sustainer and our protector, and we're grateful for you and your provision, Lord. We just ask that this time would be just building up, that we would get to know each other better and just get to process, look at scripture, and also just go deeper into relationship with one another. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Great. Welcome. It's Bible study, and it's kind of, I don't know who I've seen. I'm like, oh, y'all have been following along in Bible study? I'm not really sure, because I never saw you all like this before. So we've been streaming live for the last, since this time last year. And so here's a full life giving with Pastor Reese here in the front. If you would like to contribute to the mission of Honor Us in the Lowell Neighborhood, you can do that. But so I just want to take a minute just to think about, just the moment that we're in right now, where we're at, the history of Fresno, the history of each of our lives. Like we said, this is kind of the 1-year anniversary of lockdown. Today is also the 1-year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd, which is just wild to think about because, I don't know, it seems like in so many ways that this year has been really long and really fast at the same time, just depending on the aspects of how we look at it, So, and I think for all of us, we would say that this has been a very testing season. It's been a difficult season, which is one reason why I'm really glad that we ended up discerning to be in the year that we are as honors. So we're in our year theme, Unshakable Kingdom, and we're studying the book of Hebrews. And the book of Hebrews is all about a community that's facing really hard times, and they are contemplating if following Jesus is worth the troubles that they're going through, and whether or not they should just pack it up and go home, And so, I don't know, we might not be facing the exact same situation that the hearers of the book of Hebrews were facing, but I feel like this year has been kind of similar on an emotional level where there's just a lot going on and it's hard, and for some of us, maybe the temptation is church is just one more thing to be a part of, and it's if my life is already stressful, what if I just cut things out of my life that would make it a little bit less stressful? And that might not be your situation, but I think it's been a season where we're just struggling in one way or another, We've all faced different kinds of loss, different kinds of grief, different kinds of having plans be foreclosed, be taken off the table. My wife Jessica and I were about to take a trip to Ireland. I haven't been out of the country in forever, and we were going to go on a trip to Ireland. And we got it all paid for, and it was all ready. And it was you're not going anywhere. Can you all hear me?
Oh, Bakersfield.
Bakersfield. Oh, we went to Paso Robles on Sunday. It was really nice. Oh, thank you. So this mic is heavy.
Hello?
Okay. Yeah, they're
Okay.
Oh, yes.
All right. Cool.
So, like I was saying, I don't have to remind you all that this has been a difficult year. And I just want to hold space for all the ways that this has been a hard time. And Yeah, it's we don't want to just like feel like, oh, we're here at church, everything is awesome. Like let's just pretend that none of that happened, right? So that's not what we're going to do. And that's not what we see happening in the book of Hebrews either. The author of the book of Hebrews is, recounting with them at different points the difficult times they're going through and the real, like, material, physical dangers that they're in because of their situation. And I can sum that up a little bit if you want. The Hebrew Christians in the book of Hebrews, the people who were the audience of this sermon, right, were kind of facing a really tough situation where they were basically a religious minority times two. They were ostracized from their home communities. They were ethnically Jewish, living in the Greek Roman world. So they were kind of like foreigners, and then they were also foreigners from their own home cultures. And so their temptation was, to either kind of go native or to maybe try to shed their Christian distinctives and go back to their original kind of synagogue communities. And so, you might not be facing the same situation like that, but I think we've all experienced this year as kind of hard and even maybe alienating from some of our own like Christian culture, because we've seen this year be a year where, I don't know, at least for me, I've been a lot of times disappointed in what I've seen kind of like, in the world around through media and stuff about just kind of how the church in general has responded to all this. I don't know if you all resonate with that at all, but sometimes I'm like, man, I don't know if I want to identify with some of these people. And so what does it mean to claim Christ? What does it mean to hold on to our identity as Christians in our faith when we are kind of facing all of these different pressures, right? And there's temptation to maybe just find somewhere else to hang out, or find something else to do with our time, or maybe disassociate from our communities. And so last week, if you were checking out the live stream, we talked about kind of Hebrews warning to the people that were thinking about kind of going back, kind of giving up on their faith in Jesus. And that's a really tricky passage that we talked about last week. And it was, if you recall, or if you weren't there, kind of like a passage that has been over time in the history of Christianity sort of used in very I would say destructive ways to kind of tell people like, if you become a Christian and then you stop going to church, God is done with you. God has a one-strike policy and one-strike playground. We talked a little bit about why that's not the best way to read that passage. And the text that we're coming into tonight is following on the heels of that kind of, this is a sermon. Hebrews is a sermon to this community, and the author of Hebrews is getting real bold in telling them, listen, you think that maybe it's going to take the pressure off you to give up your Christian faith right now, but that is not a good idea. You don't want to miss out on what God is doing through Jesus by giving up on your faith, just because it's getting hard right now. And so we're going to go to our text now, if you'd like to follow along with me. There we go. So, you can read along with me, and I will read it to you. It says, so, that even though we speak like this is in reference to the kind of warning about falling away that happened in the passage previously, which, like I said, if you read that and you didn't listen to last week's, I would encourage you to listen to last week's Bible study, because it is literally one of the most divisive texts in the history of Christianity. And so there's a lot of context that's important about that. But the author goes on and says, even though we speak like this, dear friends, we are convinced of better things in your case, things that have to do with salvation. God is not unjust. He will not forget the work and the love you have shown him as you have helped his people and continue to help them. It's that high up here. God is not unjust. He will not forget the work and the love that you have shown as you help his people continue to love him. We want each of you to show the same diligence to the very end, so that what you hope for may be fully realized. We do not want you to become lazy, but to imitate those who through faith and patience inherit what has been promised. So this is the word of the Lord. We're thankful to God for it. So like I said, this comes on the heels of like a warning passage about not giving up on Jesus because they're having this hard time. Right? But he says, maybe I spoke really strongly, but I'm convinced of better things in your case because God isn't unjust. We won't forget the work and the love that you've shown as you've helped God's people continue to help them. So I think that's like an encouraging, it's kind of, what they say is like a good rhetorical thing, right? Like if you're going to criticize someone, you want to sandwich it in some compliments in between. So I have, if you have this text, I would love you to hold it up because we're gonna look at a couple of words in here. We have some key words that I want to just like unpack for you all in this text. So side by side so you can see the text, but I hope that you can find it in your phone. It was Hebrews chapter 6, verses 9 through 12. And so the first thing I want to look at is the word that's translated here, diligence, in verse 11. So it says, we want you to show the same diligence to the very end. And so remember, if you know the context of this, this whole month our theme has been maturity anchored in Christ. And so the writer is talking about their lack of maturity. He's kind of convicting them about, he says, like, at this point, most of you should have been teachers by now, but you're not, obviously, and so he's saying, like, I want you to mature, to grow up, like Mama Marsha in this sermon at the beginning of this month, right? She said, grow up. Very good. Very memorable. Right?
That's great.
The people agree. And so in this text, we're starting to get to the point where the author is telling us, like, how do we get to that maturity that the author is pushing us towards? Because it's one thing to be like, hey, you need to grow up, like, you need to become mature. But without instruction, like, how are we supposed to know what maturity looks like, right? We talked last couple weeks ago about how, just in Scripture in general, the Bible talks about how maturity is rooted in the person, in the life of Jesus. So Jesus is the model of maturity in human form that we look to. But, that's kind of vague, right? Like, we get more specific. So the author says here, we want each of you to show the same diligence to the very end, so that what we hope for will be fully realized. The word diligence there is a Greek word called spouda, or maybe just like spouda. I don't know how to say it. Anyone need Greek speakers here? So diligence, and it means earnestness and accomplishing, promoting, and striving after something. So it's like being about,
Being about?
Being about it. Like making that your thing. So really commit to it, like it's about not kind of making it like your side hustle or, like an extra thing that you do sometimes on the weekends, right?
Okay.
Like the path towards maturity is the thing that we would say, it's not just like, oh, that would be really nice. Like we're maturing into what God intends like us to be as humans. Like this is not just kind of like a virtue building project, but this is about our lives. Like what is our lives going to be defined by? And that's why I think the author is very insistent on not kind of looking both ways, saying like, look, if you are going towards the goal that is Jesus, and then you turn away, it says like, how are you going to be reconciled back if you're going this way? It's like, if you are supposed to walk, one thing we said last week was, it's like if you're walking with your spouse, if you have made a commitment in marriage to your spouse, and you're walking with them, and then you start going off in this opposite direction, how are you going to be reconciled as long as you're going in two different directions at once? You're internally inconsistent, and so it's hard to mature that relationship. So diligence, it's about earnestness, promoting or striving after something. So this is, I think, what Jesus called in the Beatitudes purity of heart. Purity of heart. As a famous author once said, is to will one thing only. And so you can think the end of something about that. Purity of heart is to will only one thing, right? Is that how it goes? That's purity. Okay. We gotta look at it. So I'm just trying to act like I know what I'm talking about. Okay. Yeah. The word lazy here, this next one. I'm sorry, you all probably can't see the screen from here, huh? Can you all see the screen? Okay. The word laziness, I'm not even trying to say it. No throws. Slow, sluggish, dull, languid, indolent. Those are all words that we don't really use, but it just, I don't know. Laziness, I just wanted to throw those other words on there because it's not just kind of like a moral virtue that you're saying like you're slow, you're kind of like taking a long time. This next one is really important. This is a word that happens in the New Testament so often that I think because of the history of just how Christianity has rolled out over the years, we tend to misunderstand what the real nuance of this word is. So the word faith, in Greek it's the word pistis. And what I wrote here, this is not from like the concordance or whatever, because the concordance would say something like believing in something. And that makes it sound like it's very much like what you do inside your brain. Like it's about the kind of like mental categories you have in your mind. Like, oh, do I believe? Like, and that's part of it, but I like to put here active trust or allegiance, because whatever you have allegiance to, you already believe it in your mind, but it's already gone from your mind into your body. And that's when it's made like the full circle, right? So just believing something, if you think about it as just like, here it is, it's up in my noggin. I believe aliens could exist. Well, that's a bad example. But like, I can have the belief that I think aliens exist. It doesn't affect my life at all. Even if I learned that aliens exist on the news, I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this knowledge, right? It's not belief in the biblical sense. Like I can say, I believe aliens exist. I can say, I believe 9/11 was an inside job. It's like, okay, how does that change anything about like my life? It's like a really intense belief to hold, but it's like, it can't move to the realm of pistis because that means like it's changing your orientation towards life because of something that you don't just believe, but you have put active trust in. And in this case, we're talking about God. We're talking about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, right? So putting your faith in God is not just believing that there's a being that exists called God. It's actively putting our moment-to-moment trust in God as revealed in Jesus Christ. So if you keep coming to Bible study, you'll hear that many times because I think it's a really important thing to get down, that we tend to intellectualize or sort of, we turn faith into like an exercise that we do inside of our minds. And that is not what the Bible really means. Last thing, we have the word patience here, and again, macrothemia.
Sure.
Yeah, but according to concordance, it says it's like endurance, constancy, steadfastness. I like the word endurance here, which is translated to other places is endurance. So these are kind of the key words in this text that might just be helpful for you. And if you're doing it, you can come on. Hi, Dre. Welcome. It's great to have you with us. Alice has a question. Please.
So,
Of course.
would you say that many of these words that we have often thought of as like qualities are actions? It sounds kind of like verbs.
I think faith definitely is more of a verb.
That's what a participle is.
Say that?
That's what a participle is, yeah.
It's a verb and a noun.
Yeah.
Oh. My assumption is that when we have like a incomplete view, it's not that like the biblical view is kind of the opposite of it, as if it's an action as opposed to a belief, but they have a more integrated, holistic worldview. We lived through a lot of intellectual developments that made us very up in our minds a lot. And so we tend to divorce like the world of our thoughts from the world outside of us, which is just a very weird way to think about the world that's characteristically like modern and Western. So I hope that answers the question. I don't know, I couldn't tell you about like any one of these particular words. I don't know like the semantic range or the nuances of those without studying them more in depth, but I can get back to you. So this is a really good quote from, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Okay. I'm used to this thing now. So Pastor Phil a while back said this, he said, the question isn't when will we regather? And he even said this at the beginning of the pandemic, right? So everybody's worried about when are we going to get back together? When are we going to be able to have church? He says the important question is not just when will we regather. The question is what kind of people will we be when we regather? And I thought that this was very relevant to the question of maturity, especially thinking about this being the first time we've had Bible study back in a year. Between this week and the last time we met, we've all changed. Like, and we should recognize and like just acknowledge that this has been a year that's changed all of us in a lot of different ways. Like, we've changed a lot of different ways all at the same time. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's just like given me. It just seems like a time of introspection. Like, how have I changed? And like, and how has that changed? What does that change have to do with my maturity? Like, how has the pandemic made it harder to mature in Christ? Maybe what are the ways that I've seen God work in the midst of this pandemic? Like, maybe some of you are like doing awesome. You're so like, I didn't have to go to work for a year. I could just sit at home and pray. I'm just like, right? If that's you, please God. Please. You can hear, have my microphone. But yeah, and so this was just ringing in my ears as we were coming back, because I'm like, this is the time that we get to ask this question. Who are we now that we're back together, right? We're all waiting, and we're like, well, no. Some of us were excited. Some of us introverts and people with social anxiety, like, we're like, oh my gosh, could this go a year? Ooh, it'd be so good. But some of us were really looking to get back, and I think that's not a bad thing. We are social beings, we need one another. And so whether or not we're introverts or extroverts, the isolation has taken a toll on all of us, because it doesn't matter what your personality is, we are meant for one another. And the internet just doesn't cut it, right, for relationships.
Right.
We were talking about this today. We were talking about, Pastor Missy interviewed us, Lowell and I, about, like, what do you think about the church and social media? We were saying, it's good, like, there's some cool things about it. It can't take the place of real relationship. And whether or not some of us were in school, some of us were trying to do work over the internet, like, it just makes it more difficult. And there is, like, a quality of relationship that we've been missing, and that I think in a lot of ways we're starved for. And so we should acknowledge that and think about, like, how is that leading us closer to maturity in Christ? Like, what is that teaching us about? What does it mean to be a community? Like, what does it mean to follow Christ together? We've discovered some things about ourselves in this season, and can we use those discoveries, even if they're painful, to point us towards maturity?
That's
Right?
good. That's so good.
So what's next? Okay. So I wanted to give us a little bit, this is an aside a little bit, and I touched on this in the thing with them. The temptation of the Hebrew Christians in the book of Hebrews, right, was for them, in a time of trouble, in a time filled with danger, physical danger, to retreat back to their old ways. And some of us saw the pandemic being a time when we felt that temptation to retreat back to our old ways. Anytime when we experience stress, it's easy to go back to what we're familiar with, right? And sometimes we even recognize that it's unhealthy, but we're like, it's comforting for me to go back to my old ways, right? But they were retreating from this new thing that God was doing, to go back to their kind of safe, homogenous communities. Because one thing we'll have to remember is that these are Hebrew Christians going from like a monocultural kind of enclave community, one where everyone spoke their language, everybody was culturally similar, like they all knew each other, they all knew how to communicate with each other. When they said yes to Jesus, they entered into a multicultural community where it was Hebrew Christians, it was Gentile Christians, it was, what is it? Slave and free, male and female, Jew, Gentile, and even Scythians. And Paul would know, he'd be like, even Scythians? That doesn't mean anything to all. But Scythians were like the people who were farthest out. They were like, people thought of them like we would think about aliens, actually. Literally Scythians were people, they were like nomadic steppe people who lived out in the plains of, Central Asia or kind of Russia, the steppes. And their lifestyle was just so different that the idea that you could be in community with Scythians is like us saying my community is me, my friends, and then, those guys that lived on the island, that's never been contacted by people, and that they shoot bows and arrows at you if you try to come to it, it would be kind of like that. That's a little bit about the cultural difference, But Paul's in Christ, the boundaries that keep us separated from one another are broken down. But that doesn't mean that it's easy. And in this time of stress, I think that the Hebrew Christians were feeling the temptation to go back to a community that was familiar to them, that was easier to walk around and move in. But God is calling them into something that is objectively more difficult, which is a community that spans these different cultures and that tries to bring fellowship to people who don't all speak the same or even alike, You can speak the same language, but not speak the same language. You know what I mean? We all speak English here, but we don't all speak the same language. And so what does it mean that God is bringing us together into a community where we really care for each other across those boundaries? That's difficult. And that's why we say the gospel is tension and grace, right? And that this is something that On-Ramps is trying to do. We try to lean into the tension that comes from the difference that we experience, because we think this is something that God is about. So that might be one reason why they were feeling the stress, Hello, welcome, Jesus. So I want to ask you, what kind of tensions are you experiencing right now in this season? I was thinking about this and work has been weird. the future is canceled, like, just our health and safety, like seeing other people for so long has been like, oh man, I miss you, but also you are potentially dangerous to me. Like just proximity to humans is something we have to think about, like dying from. That's doing something to us, you know? Like I said earlier, like our church culture, I feel a lot of tension because of the way American Christianity exists right now. On the other hand, like just the feeling of not being known, of being like stuck in our own like little worlds, whether it's like house to house or even just like person to person, you know. That lack of connection makes it hard to feel like people know you. Or maybe there's tension about like not wanting, like you don't want to feel known right now, and that's a tension too. All these tensions are like real and we want to acknowledge them because they're coming from a situation, a context that we've all experienced together. And so I want to say that like on-ramps needs to be the kind of place where we can like work through those tensions together, where we can like unpack them as a community. We can talk about them openly and not feel like we're going to be judged for how we're experiencing this, or just kind of like what it's bringing up in us. And even if it's hindering our maturity, you know, like we have to be okay about that. To walk with people who are like, man, this has been really hard on my maturity. Like I've gone backwards. That's reality for some of us. And that's okay. Like Jesus is not done with us. Last week I said, Jesus does not have a one strike and you're out policy. He has a 70 times 7 strikes and you're out policy. But that's hyperbole. He means God is the God that keeps forgiving and keeps coming back. We can turn our backs on God, but God will not turn his back on you. And so whenever you, like the prodigal son, right? You turn around, God is already halfway to you, like running. Like, I'm so glad you came back.
That's good.
So, tension embracing. Because we serve that God, we can enter into the hard parts of each other's relationships with confidence. And we're not going to discover something that means that we have to cast you out. You know, we're not going to discover anything about your last year that's going to say, man, you can't come to Bible study. You know? You can't come have dinner with us. We can't be that kind of community. We will do damage to our witness as Christians. So, what's the next slide? Yeah, we talked about this a little bit, but I want to maybe give you a chance at your own table to talk to the people around your table. These 2 questions. How has this season been a struggle for you? And that's very open. You can answer that however. And then at the same time, where have you seen God at work in this? Because those are not mutually exclusive. It's not just that God is at work when everything is going well for us, right? We all know that, yeah? So I want to give you just, a couple minutes. Answer this with your group. Go.
Great question. Oh no. I feel like oh my god. This season's been like a real struggle. So I feel like vocationally, I feel like there's just been a lot of lack of clarity. It's like we moved 2 times, changed jobs again. A lot of, I've had just like unclarity and like not even feeling like the future is canceled, but the future just like literally, I don't know what's in it. That's a very uncomfortable feeling for me. And I think, that's been a real struggle. So I think where God's been at work is just like really digging deep down into the parts of me that feel like my worth is dependent on the things that I contribute or produce, or like the clarity that I have about how I will be productive and contributing in the future. Because I'm like, I don't know. So a lot of deep like work stuff and being okay with unknown, like really. It's a short answer.
Can I just say, like, I'm so impressed at how easily you can articulate that.
It's been a year.
It's such a complex thing, and I'm sitting here thinking, like, oh, this isn't been a struggle. Like, I don't even really, like, how to even start that. You've so succinctly explained this complexity. Good job.
I think like the thing I'm really thankful for is that I've had opportunities to reflect on those things that have been like built in for me. Because otherwise I wouldn't. I would just, I don't know, try to make it through and not pay attention to my feelings. Yeah. But I think, yeah.
It's like no situation.
Already a stressful life, job,
Yeah, I mean, I think like for me, it's maybe this is like the privilege of my upbringing or whatever, but I've always had the ability to not have to feel about stuff. Like you can just sort of like you can get away with not thinking about it. And this season's been really hard because it's like it's not just one thing that happens, right? It's like thing after thing after thing after thing. So after months and months and months of already like watching, the evangelical church that raised me, right, that introduced me to Jesus, completely fold, crumble around this idol, and then to like be in the process of mourning for that, still need to have like pandemic happen. Right, and to be mourning for that still, and then to have like election and the insurrection happen, and to be mourning for that still, and to have like Joe Biden not do anything about the border, or like student loans or any of these other things, and that's like macro level stuff that don't have any impact on me or my life directly while I'm locked in my house, and that stuff is just like weighing over you. And then meanwhile, the stuff that's in my house, like holy shit, my job is gotten like 3 times more time consuming, and it was already like I've already put in 60 hours a week. There just are not there aren't these hours. They don't exist. That all that stuff kind of at once, and then to not have any of the practice at articulating what any of this feels like. Like it's a lot, right? It's a lot. And so the struggle is something even now that I can't really say what the struggle is.
It is, and it's all those things. Yeah, it's very meta, and at the same time, it's very imminent and transcendent at the same time. Because it's like you look right in front of you, and you're like, dang, this is really stressful. And you look at the world around you, and you're like, dang, this is really stressful. But I feel like it doesn't. There's not a lot of like calm places to go, or even like in my own mind, there's no calm places to go to like think about this stuff. It's everywhere.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and that's also like to see where God has been at work in this season. Is like fortifying our home. It's really been fun to it. And I'm thinking about we were just talking about this morning, how there's like a danger of the revert to being rural. You two with your family all the time, right? And you no longer get to live in the tension of people that you don't necessarily agree with or think like. But the opposite side of that is just this return to understanding of home as the place of safety. Right, where this is where I can go and not have to worry about those things. This is where I can go and kind of pull back from that stuff. And it's not perfect, right? Like when the world is literally burning down and you can't go outside because you'll suffocate. There's still some difficulty to deal with.
Oh my gosh, that was so hard.
It was so bleak.
It was like the middle of the pandemic, and it's like you can't stay inside, else you can't go outside.
But you might be evacuated, and there also might be an earthquake.
Yeah, right. The only thought that got me through that was thinking that fathers in every era have looked at their children and thought maybe it was better if we weren't born. Like that was the thought that got me through that span.
Yeah,
Was
it's
thinking
hard.
it's dark. It was a bleak time. It was not a good.
Some
it was
World
not a
War
good time
stuff.
either.
I have like walked that life.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about that stuff before. It feels like it's so fun.
Yeah. It was not a fun time.
Yeah.
But still, like I think that see God working just in the fortification of our foundation.
Yeah.
Right? And the foundation being like at our home. This is our space. And essentially like for us because we never had roots. Since we've been married. We've been these like kind of rootless academic, wandering applicants going around from the roof and library to library. And so now to have a place where it's like, no, we have roots here, and we're going to sink in here and to really like to set the foundation. It's respectful.
That is really cool. I tend towards the nihilistic when I experience that stuff too. So
Yeah.
that's weirdly comforting, I guess. I don't know. It's like, oh, you think about that too? Like, yeah.
Did you share?
No. I mean, I feel like I was sharing from my own thoughts up here, but yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to that, just like, yeah, just feeling stuck and then also like, very powerless, like, about all the stuff that's going on. And I think when that stuff happens, I can just kind of like turn inward and just like zone out and become despondent about stuff. So yeah, that was definitely a struggle. Like because then you're stuck in this place where it's like you want to know about what's going on, but then it's just like, well, it only makes you mad. And there's nothing you can do about it. So there's kind of like this impotent rage, and like it just kind of like turns into, I don't know, just I'm going to sleep.
Impotent Rage sounds like a really good memoir for you to write about the pandemic.
Despite all my rage, I'm still Sharon a memoir.
Like,
Still just a dude in the mask.
Right. The pandemic in late capitalism,
Yeah.
Central California.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I wouldn't elaborate more after this.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
It's a real struggle.
I know.
Thank you guys for sharing.
Yeah.
Keep going? Keep going? Yes, please. This is why we're here, right? You can't do this offline.
Not in the same way. Zoomed out. Did you want to share more about that?
I guess I get a really good feeling and stuff.
Yeah.
I feel this stuff a lot more than you do.
Safety's a lot more. Yeah.
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 Oh yeah, that's right.
When we're almost trying to talk about it like it's in the past.
I know it's not. We're still
Yeah.
here. We're still in
So I mean that's gonna make it harder to reflect on. So
The whole like home thing is really interesting too, because I think I found myself. We talked about this a little bit. I found myself like longing for a better sense of home because, like I said, we moved 2 times and we are renting. And I think I've had this longing of like, oh, I wish we were homeowners right now for the specific season, so that we could like develop whatever we wanted to develop. But instead, we're just like bopping around, living in a basement, living with 23-year-olds, which is fine. Like those are the life choices we've made, you know. But it was a really interesting year that just pointed. I think it helped me clarify my consciousness about like what it means to feel less than secure in terms of housing. I feel like our housing never felt secure, so it was always on edge. Like what is going to happen?
Well, it's kind of in somebody else's space.
Yeah. So I feel like I'm still holding a little bit of that, so it's slowly like letting down.
Our landlords.
Yeah. Yeah, but I feel like, that's slowly laying down, but this like on edge in terms of housing, for sure.
That's true.
But on the flip side, it's been so cool to see other people like, really like build that foundation, like you said, and like love their homes and love those like domestic things. People baking and people gardening and people, I don't know, making beer and stuff. Like that's great. Like those are all really cool
things that you'd like to do. And
exactly.
It's like, no, I know. I had a season in my life where I was very housed insecure. I was actually homeless for about 3 months, and it was about probably 4 years or so where I would move every maybe 2 months. This is before.
I hope you all are being blessed by these conversations. We're getting down to the end of our time. I don't want to cut you off from your fellowship with one another, but maybe I just want to like leave you in these last minutes with a text that hopefully can anchor you. And feel free to we'll keep talking after this, but I'm skipping forward in Hebrews a little bit, but I wanted to share this. Talking about maturity, we're talking about like how do we become more mature? And I'm skipping to the back of the book where the answers are. And the author says, "Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith." And let's consider what we mean by faith here, right? Who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. So here we have the same themes. We have, we have Jesus, we have our faith, and then we have the whole endurance thing, which were kind of key aspects of our text in Hebrews 6. And so I think this is kind of the author getting to a crescendo of, it's like, what does it look like to strive towards maturity? It's about fixing our eyes on Jesus. And not just as individuals either. As individuals, but more than as individuals, as a community as well. And so I guess I want to give you these questions, maybe to like take home, so you can take pictures of these or something, or I will post them on our social media maybe tomorrow. But these are questions that I'm thinking about in the season, and I just want to invite you to think about them alongside with me. We'll continue to dive into them more in the future, but like we're thinking about what is this next season. We're not saying like this last season was over. That's not really how seasons work. They blend into each other, right? We're all still wearing masks. We're talking about, well, this last year's pandemic, right? So I grant that, right? We're not just like clean break. But we're in a new season because we're back together right now in this moment. And we're trying to figure out what it means to be church community after the pandemic, or maybe in the later seasons of it or something, you know? But what does faith look like for on-ramps in this season? How are we defining it? What does it mean to fix our eyes on Jesus? Like, not in a pietistic way, but like as a community in the Lowell Neighborhood, you know, in 2021, like with the real world, think about intersect that statement with like all the things you've been recalling this year about the world in your life, you know? This is not happening on some like abstract plane. This is happening in our lives, like on Calaveras, on San Paulo, you know, on Blackstone. I don't know if any of you live on Blackstone, but you know what I mean. And what does endurance look like for on-ramps in this season? What does it mean for us to, what do we have to endure? Like, what do you need to lean on your faith to endure in this season, right? So it's going to be different for all of us. And it's also going to be an answer we have to ask, it's a question we have to answer together. What does on-ramps have to endure? What are the things that are challenging us? It might take time for us to figure that out. You know? I don't know if we know that. We all might have some different opinions, but we need to come together and discern this, figure out what it means. So those are some questions. Yeah. What do we have to have faith in the face of? Wow, that's confusing. Faith in the face. Yeah. What is our allegiance to Jesus having in contrast to? What are the things that are tempting us to put our faith in other than Jesus? Like, what are the other allegiances that are calling to us that are like, that looks better right now, you know? And then what are the things that we need endurance to withstand? What are the things that are coming against us in this season? And that could be you know, that could be at your work, it could be in your own life, but it also means us. Like, when I think about on-ramps, I think about our situational goal. Like, what is something that we have to have endurance to withstand? I think is like the fallout of this pandemic. It means like intense economic hardship for our neighborhood. And like, we can't just say, okay, like if we pray, you know, there won't be any crime, right? Because the truth is, it's like people are being evicted left and right in our neighborhood, right? Like, we are experiencing hard times in the Lowell neighborhood, which means that there's going to be like consequences. And we can be the kind of community that pretends that like we stay upbeat, that like it's not happening, right? Or we can be the kind of community that gets into the trenches and says like, how do we actually like come together to weather this together, to make it through with joy, like holding on to hope, and actually being able to help, you know? And then we're going to see God in the midst of that. It doesn't mean that we're going to just you know, kickflip over the whole situation, you know? But like, we have to face the reality that we have to endure things. And like, we experienced a really hard year. As they say, when the suburbs catch cold, the hood gets the flu or pneumonia. And like, that's the reality of inequality in our country. Is that like, we live in places that some places like calamity is not equally distributed amongst our communities, right? So it's like, we are a church that has decided to make Lowell our parish. And that means that we have to be specific about how we're going to get church in this season. When the pandemic might be over, but the ripple effects of that pandemic are not going anywhere, you know? And people are going to rush and say, let's go back to normal, let's go back to normal. We know better than that. We know that it doesn't work like that, you know? We don't get to just go back to normal and pretend, oh, that was a weird year, right? Yeah, that's not the reality for anybody, but we don't even get the luxury of pretending that that's reality. And so we have to look straight into the truth, the painful truth of the world around us, the situation I'm in, and say, what does it mean to be a community that follows Jesus into history? Not into like fictionalized reality, but we would rather be the case. The real hard truth about what's going on around us, you know? And if we think, and if we're scared of that, that's okay. But the promise is that we're going to find hope by doing that, not by running away from it, right? That we're going to see Jesus in like the realness of the situation, not by trying to escape the situation. So I want to give you, like, that's very scary. That's what the whole faith thing is, right? Like, it's not just like, I believe that, you know, I have this belief about what's going to happen to me when I die. It's saying, like, if I dive into the messiness of like acknowledging the real pain around me, that I'm going to be able to find God's presence in it, not by trying to escape from it to find God, right? That's what the incarnation is about. Jesus became a human. So we find Jesus in, you know, in the mess, in the funk, as Dr. Cornell West says.
Yes.
Yeah, so those are my encouragements to you. That was a little intense, but I can save some of that for to be with you all. So I think about Chairwoman Kim here, our church chair, and when we were thinking about what is 2021 going to be for on-ramps, she said only the real will survive. I think that was really good. That was a wise word that like has grabbed me and held on to. So I thank you for that. And I think that that's something that Jesus is into. Like Jesus is into pushing us towards acknowledging the real, and then having hope in that situation. Like it's easy to have hope when we put on rose-colored glasses about the world. Everything's great. You know, isn't God good? If you can say isn't God good when things are not good, like that's real faith. That's business in right? So yeah, I want us to as we go forward into this new season, that's my hope, is that we will get real and we'll start to really lean into what does it mean to be a community of faith in this season that we're in. So let's pray. Yeah, God, we just lean on you. We ask that you would sustain us, that you would bind us together as a community, that you show us really what it means to be disciples of you, that you show us what it means to walk your path. And we ask for grace for the way that we are scared and selfish, that we are, just like addicted to our delusions and our illusions because they're uncomforting. You've told us to leave those things, to come out of the darkness and into the light, to come from a state of sleeping to a state of being awake. So we just ask that you wake us up. Let us see the people around us and really invest in the community that you've called us to. Because there we'll find life. In the flourishing of the city you told us that we've been called into, we'll find our own flourishing. So we trust you about that. We desire to experience and know you in new ways in this new season. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Okay. Shanteka said that there's extra food. So if you would like to take some food home for yourself, if you'd like to take some food home for your neighbor, if you know somebody who needs food, there's extra food. So please be strategic about that. And please enjoy it. Have seconds if you want. And also, I want to encourage you, if we were having good conversations during our conversation time, to take those, to the courtyard. sit around and just catch up with one another. It's important for you. See y'all next
Huh?
Question.